Hi, my name is Tino Themelis, and today I'll be talking to you a little bit about income inequality. Income inequality is the disparity in the distribution of wealth among the population of a country. And specifically, I'll be talking about the United States, that experiences some of the worst income inequality in the world. Now, I must admit that this is one of the most complex economic subjects in the world that people take their entire lives to study, try to solve, and figure out. But that being said, I'll do my very best to make sure that we can get the most out of this video as possible. So I'd like to start by addressing the United States' economic system at the moment. The most obvious thing is the massive growing wealth gap in the United States. The gap has been increasing since the 1970s, and the top 1% of American earners earn more than 20 times the bottom 90% on an annual basis. That is not a sustainable wealth model and will put an increasing amount of people under financial stress as time goes on. Basic healthcare will become unattainable, and the standard of living will drop for the general population because of the lack of the potential to get a higher wage job. Essentially, the middle class will disappear as a large wage gap becomes wider. Now, the middle class accounts for the average American who can bring innovation and hunger to an economic system that needs competition. Now, this gap also heavily affects consumerism, something that America heavily relies on. Now, when the money has less public to spend and are able to buy things from corporations, from shops, from small businesses, and likewise, the lack of consumption means simple neighborhood shops and even large corporations to an extent will be heavy hit on profit. Small businesses you could consider almost obsolete in this circumstance. Now, all of this is loosely described as wealth distribution. And one of the biggest things of wealth distribution is inheritance, as admitted by many economists. Now, when wealthy people get their prizes and give their prizes and possessions to their children, it creates a legacy of wealth that aids generations as it gets passed down. And this added wealth betters the education status of that family and in many cases can lead to even more wealth. This education disparity can even be seen on standardized tests in the United States of America. The academic gap in test scores has increased by 40% between the rich and the poor in America in the last 30 years. That is no coincidence. Studies have shown that states with the biggest income inequality see the smallest increase in test scores. Having no wealth to pass down can result in a vicious cycle of generational poverty. Having no money for education, many poorer Americans must resort to lower income, entry-level jobs that have no great outlook or prospect for growth in the future. This cycle, like a dog chasing its tail, can perpetuate for decades because access to education is so limited due to income. And frankly, it does happen in the United States of America, often targeting minority groups and those that are marginalized. The money that those people inherit can be put to work to create more money. Unlike someone who doesn't have that money and would have to work to even get the basic inheritance that the richer person got from day one. So, how did this happen? How did we get here? Well, it can really be traced back to four major things: taxes on corporations, technology, trade, and government institutions. The taxes on corporations can be traced back to the 1970s, something I like to call the Jurassic period of economics. During this period, unemployment and inflation began to rise. Lawmakers began trying to stimulate the economy naturally, but labor unions came under attack and corporate and financial institutions were deregulated to encourage private investment. Now, this in itself is an awful idea, but it led to even more things. And it was an ominous foreshadowing of the lax corporate taxations that have resulted in wide wealth inequality for the future. Rich people and rich corporations aren't paying their taxes. That resulted in lower tax rates for corporations and higher earning individuals. leading to a steady rise in income inequality, and by 2007, the richest 1% accounted for 18% of the economy's total income. A following Great Recession and housing crisis wasn't exactly all that amazing to follow things up either. This recession exacerbated many of the wealth gap issues we see today. Technology growth in the last few decades has added to this, surprisingly. The increasing demand for skilled laborers has diminished the value of those less skilled laborers who cannot afford high levels of education. Increases in international trade and offshore employment have caused job losses as well. So this is another big deal in terms of wealth or income inequality, is offshoring jobs. You see it among lots of big corporations owned by people like Elon Musk, people like Jeff Bezos, Nike, Apple, Adidas. They use a lot of offshoring jobs because of cheaper amounts of labor in different countries willing to invite these big countries, big corporations, to try to stimulate their own economies. Now, workers face wage competition with offshore employees and are forced to accept lower wages as a result of this offshoring. Meaning that if a company can offer lower wages or can get offered lower wages in another country, workers will often be forced to accept even lower wages than that because there's the prospect that their job will disappear like that, and those jobs and those wages will go to a different country where people are getting paid less when they can make more profit off of a worker's labor. Now, as you can expect, they heavily impact the lives of those getting these wages. Words cannot be minced here. The U.S. corporations prioritize keeping low-waged workers in their jobs to do the dirty work in the country. There is no problem with having a lower-wage job, but offshoring and creating the conditions necessary to make it near impossible to advance your wages takes millions of lives for granted. So what I'm saying here is that there is a large influence by these corporations that make it very, very hard for one to move up in society through this company. They're low-wage, low-paying jobs with no real outlook for a better prospect. And a lot of this, as said before, connects to education. Because as one gets more educated, they are technically more qualified for said job. And when people who have been through vicious cycles of generational poverty with no chance and very, very little opportunity to get a higher level of education, they don't have the same chance that one who had a more wealthy background to be able to rise out of that poverty, because they don't have the chance of that education. They don't have a chance to be able to get out of that starter job, get out of those lower paying, lower corporation jobs. So that being said, there must be something done to make sure that the United States as a country can help lift people out of this, These inequalities will persist, and poor people will remain poor in droves if we don't break the cycle of generational poverty and help stop income inequality. Now, I'm not saying if you're poor, you should sit on your ass because there's nothing better you can do about your income. I'm saying the opposite. Regardless of income level, all Americans must band together to see the deep income inequality issues that divide this country. The more we look past the myth that working hard can simply solve our problems, or that if you're poor, maybe you're too lazy, and the more we investigate the true issues of our wealth disparity, the more justice can be done to the working class of America. And the more we can create a fair game for all who play. Thank you. I hope you learned more about income inequality in this long video.